It's round 6 of the Tata Steel Cheese Tournament, and Gukesh D and Nodirbek Abdusatorov are battling it out for the future of chess. And one of these players probably could have done with this little bad boy, the Magic Mind productivity shot. You give it a shake, you bang it down, one a day, boost your productivity. Here we go, cheers. And the best thing about it, it's even got mushrooms in it to really boost your productivity. We love it on this channel. I'm taking one a day, feeling great. And what's good about it is, yes, it doesn't replace sleep or exercise or diet, but it could give you that last 5% right, get productive, get what's done on the to-do list. Would it have helped one of these players today? There's a bundle in the description. Follow the link. You know the drill, right? magicmind.com/epicjan. Check out the deal. Productivity shots, sleep elixir. Really, really good deal. Take a look here. Now with white, we've got Nodirbek, and he kicks off with e4. Best by test here. What does Gukesh do in response? The current world champion, he goes e5, and after the knights develop into the game, we get the Gucci Reza piano on the board, named after the king of fashion. Now we see Gukesh copying the move, and these are some of the common moves for white here in the opening. Do we see any of them? No. On the board, we get pawn to a4. What a move played so early in the game. Aggressive. Now we see knight f6 in response. Sorry, still swallowing the productivity shot. It attacks the pawn in the center, defended, d6 now from black, standard stuff. We see the further expansion with this pawn, a6 on the way, so the check is flicked in. Could be preparing to win this pawn soon. So this bishop blocks the way and defends the a pawn. We see an exchange of those juicy bishops. Now the knight recaptures and both players castle. Quick king safety fist bump. Exploded out. Great etiquette over the board. This knight starts a rotation, very standard. c3, the knight hits g6, and we get Chewbacca's favourite move, the Wookiee one. h6 gives the king some Lufthansa, takes control of g5, and now the expansion in the centre. Here Nodirbek just sitting slightly better. How to respond there when the centre's under siege? Of course, completely forget which way to move your pieces, completely freak your opponent out, and I'm drawing on the board a couple of moves which would come to my mind. You know, this looks quite nice, knight f1, they're not bad moves, but what we see Nodirbek do is rook e3 here, whispers away, do you even rook lift, bro? Giving Gukesh the eye stare, and it's a very, very strange move. Now after knight g5, it does anticipate the clearing of the third rank here, but we don't see a rook swing. Instead we see g3, keeping an eye on those knight hops. To be fair, the pawn is pinned. I guess you could have hopped, but maybe not such a good idea, because once the king moves, you'll have to move. But okay. Move wasn't played. Instead we see bishop g4, really natural coming onto the light squares, and now you don't see the queen moved here. This is pretty spicy. We see h4 played. You take me, I take you, but then the bishop has to save itself. You can take here, game goes on. Playable for black, but not necessarily best. So instead the queen slides over. Now the white queen gets out of dodge, hits the pawn, defended by the rook, and this knight hits the back rank. It's on an epic tour de horse. We see knight e7, Gukesh improving that one. Knight h2 hits the bishop, it drops back, bishop e2 now, attacks the black queen, slides into g6, and now we see takes. There's no more queen supporting. You know, would the queen have recaptured if it had still been allowed to? We'll never know, because this was played. Now the d file's open, and it's really nice play here from Abdusatorov, probing, just asking questions of Gukesh. He attacks that white queen, it hits the b5 square and attacks that e5 pawn. Again, an uncomfortable question. Do you want to play the move of f6, lift the king's kill? Bit weakening. Then bishop c4 could swap these ones. White stands a bit better. Maybe you invade. So we don't see that. Knight c6 is played, but This one stands upon foundations of slippery sand, right? Because a6, and look at the undermining of that piece. If takes, of course, it drops off the board. If b6 drops off the board, how are you reacting? Well, what we see Gukesh do is the great move of bishop c8, sticking it back on the starting square, but he opens the queen's lateral defense, and now if you capture, you could go bishop, but even stronger here is rook to pick up this pawn soon. So okay, no captures played. We see h5. Good move, because you're trying to now move that queen away from the defense of this knight here. That's why we get rook f3, queen e6, bishop c4. No way anymore that you can stay on this 6th rank. So queen e7 is played. At least it now covers the e pawn, and yes, you could capture, but this time the bishop takes back, covers the knight. Black's just about holding on, holding everything together, but it was a playable line for Nodirbek. Instead, he goes queen a4, moving out of the gaze of the rook, and now the knight hits the Etienne back row. 4 of the 5 pieces of black sitting there now. It allows white to take, which finally happens, and we see bishop takes, not rook takes. Yes, it allows queen takes on a7, but then this pawn can drop. In some lines as well, the queen really runs short of squares, and that's why after rook e3, deciding to defend the e pawn, bishop c6 hitting the queen, we don't see takes on a7. The queen actually gets instantly trapped, only escapes square c5, but of course that is covered. You know, all the squares are covered, so the queen would drop, checkmated. Therefore queen a2 sets up the battery, covers the b pawn here, and now you don't see this every day, the knight fee ketos. We love to see it, but before it can make any more progress, we see Nodirbek shut down the journey. Therefore it comes into d6. The bishop hits the outpost, lovely jubbly. We see captures there. That one was a bit of a pope, so powerful. And now after queen e6, sneaky move, you can't yet move the rook, let's say to c5, or your queen drops off the board. Therefore rook e2 played. Pours some sugar on that unprotected queen. We see pawn to c ships. The rook now moves, takes is played, and we don't see captures with the rook, which kind of negates what I just said. Instead, we see captures with this one, therefore allowing this one to keep an eye on the e pawn. Rook fc8 played. This knight re-enters the game, and instead of playing f6, playable, we don't see it, but the advance here of the c pawn, an exchange of prisoners, because after takes on c5, we get rook recaptures, takes on a7. There were different lines that could have been followed there, but it was all roughly speaking reaching a balance where white is slightly better, and after rook takes on c3, it looks like it's just fizzling out, but then there's rook d7, the knight stumbles backwards, and white wins a pawn and is now hitting f7 in the process. It's a technical endgame, but Gukesh hugely under pressure now. He plays knight f6, hits the rook, and he's saying if you take here, I'm going to go rook e8, hit your knight, and how are you going to defend it and save your rook? You're in a bind. Now it's playable because you can sack the exchange, play this, but okay, even though white's marginally better, it's hard to see how this is necessarily going to give winning chances for white, you know, the best winning chances. So we come back here, instead we get rook e7, a waiting move, coming away from this attack, and if knight takes, well, now you can take this pawn with the knight. This is the best way to go, and that's a really big one to drop, because now you've got the passed e pawn. So black didn't munch this pawn. Instead we get rook b4, hits the center, and there's some amazing variations here. You know, what if you go f3, really natural move, just covering things. Well, then there's this takes on h5, and this time if you go in for the line we just saw, the rook takes on f3, this one's no longer defending it, etc, etc. So that's why we don't see f3 played. We see instead the excellent, tricky, tactical pawn g4, and the idea is if you win this with either of the pieces, these are the tactical themes you run into. Check. The king's only got one square, you take on f7, and you're threatening mate as well as threatening the knight. And this exact same theme holds true whether you took with the rook first or the knight first as black. These are the problems that persist here. You cannot play it, you cannot touch the pawn. Therefore, we see rook c5 played, but it's not the best move. Bringing one to the back rank, probably the way to go. Because now f3 can be played, cementos everything here, and it's really tough to find moves for black, right? But white can steadily improve. And Gukesh here, he cracks under the pressure. Time's also ticking. He plays king f8, trying to get the rook out of dodge, but it allows takes with check, king e8. And although it looks like the white pieces are overloaded, defending each other, watch what Nodirbek does here. Absolute magician, tactical, calculating beast. He plays knight d3, an octopus that Stoctopus can be proud of, hitting 2 rooks. So if takes, you're going to take one of those rooks. Therefore, we see check. The king steps up, and this is the key thing. You're attacking a second rook. So again, we can get that exchange of prisoners. Therefore, rook c3 is played. Now, how are you getting out of this one? That's attacked, that's attacked. There's no rook d7 to defend it. You just get eaten. Well, this is what Nodirbek's lined up from afar here. He takes on no, he doesn't. I was going to say takes on g7. I'm ahead of myself, sorry. Knight e5 first. Now he's attacked again. And now he plays the epic. I've just spoiled it. Takes on g7. What a brilliancy. He sacrifices the entire knight here because he's gained 3 pawns for it. And after this move, threatening mate, therefore king f8 here, we see rook g6 hitting a knight and another pawn. This is getting absolutely terminal. You know, if you try and step back with the knight, cover the pawn here, well then you can check and you're simply winning an entire piece. The game is dead and buried. And if instead of stepping back, you try and step up, defend the knight, that kind of thing, well you can check once more and you're really running into trouble in these lines. Pawns dropping, that is way too many. White is winning. So you really can't hold on to this pawn in any good way, and that's why Gukesh plays the necessary and excellent counter shot. Knight takes on e4. This is the best drawing chance here. Now if you recapture straight away, the problem is you're exchanging too many prisoners. You know, you can check, do something like this, pick up the pawn, but ultimately black's going to set up this drawing mechanism. If coming back here after taking the knight, you instead play rook takes and take the pawn immediately, well the g pawn drops with check, and again this isn't enough to win, especially with the active rooks. You're always going to get perpetual checked or the pawn rounded up, something like that. So we run back, the knight not touched. Nodirbek plays the excellent rook e2. Pin and win, baby. That one can't go anywhere, of course, or this drops. No discovered checks. So we therefore see the move of rook g5. Great play, unpinning. And if you now capture the knight straight away, then you can take here, pawn recaptures, and you can round this one up. Something like this. And again, should be a technically drawn endgame despite the extra pawn. Crazy tiptoe defense here. Elite level chess. We therefore see this pawn captured. Absolute best move. Now the knight has to save itself. A seahorse is born, but there's a trio of connected pawns here. Only white can ever push for the win. We see rook c6 played. Great move. Clearing the way for the pawn to run. Pinning this knight here. Knight a4 therefore played, offering the exchange, and it's declined. Good move with rook a6. The knight saves itself. Now we see the check. The king driven up the board here. There were different ways to go, but this isn't so bad. However, once you get here, there's an absolutely killer move which Nodirbek misses. He needed that productivity shot, right? The magic mind deep into the game. What should he do here? Well, pawn h6, far and away the best move, because the rook is supporting the advance, cutting the king. You know, if king g6, that pawn is pushing, you can't come behind it, so rook g8 is necessary, but then you can come back to c7 here, and black's really getting short of moves. You know, say you try and step in, round up the pawn like that, well you can push it again, the rook goes, and now you can check. Hang on, why would you abandon the pawn? Well, look how short of squares the king is. Gets driven to the corner and mated. You know, just one sample line here. But this pawn is a massive problem in combination with the checks. If you step up, you're running into stuff like this, losing a piece. It's really, really difficult to play against. So after this h6 move here, if we just run back one and rook g8 and this, yes, stepping in with the king isn't great. If you come with the rook, then I think in this position there's check, and then I think g5 comes in a moment. Yeah, and you've got the trio of running pawns here. It's just exceptionally dangerous, just lost basically. Very difficult defense, maybe impossible for black. But h6 is missed. Instead, we see rook e8 looking to set up the same thing but in an improved kind of way, because now you've really rolled out that red carpet for the pawn. It's ready to push. I mean, it looks completely lost. How do you possibly save this game? Find a move that stops h6, h7, h8. What do you do? Well, Gukesh really shows world champion class here, comes up with the exceptional defense, and it starts with the move of knight e6, an absolute defensive octopus. And here's the really beautiful part. After h6, it sets up this second great defensive move. It's the only one to draw the game here or give drawing chances, rook e5. And the point is, if you carry on pushing, you jump, check, king g3 of course, hit the knight, but then you check again, so then the king steps back, and now you take the rook. You know, you opened up the discovery when you put the knight here and checked, and you stopped queening. So yes, white could queen and distract and then pick up the knight, but you've emerged a rook down here for just 2 pawns. Not nearly enough, you're now losing. So because of this amazing defense, the shot on the way with the check, white has to now go for this rook a6 move. What if king g3? Did I check this line, stepping out of the pin? Okay, then there's rook e to e3 it says. Which would that be? Now I'm getting confused. Rook e to e3. And if you push the pawn, okay, now you're taking here. And there's too many perpetual things going on. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, now I managed to get mated in 6. King g1 stops you getting checkmated. Okay, you don't let the knight come in with a check here. So these are the problems, right? If you do nothing and you just try and wait with king g3. So instead, we get rook a6 played, and now we get check. The king doesn't step up. If it did, then again, there's these ideas of shutting the king in with a trap. Could even lead to checkmate if you're not careful, but at least a draw. So the king steps back. We get this check. And this is how the game ended. We get this threefold repetition, almost as legendary as this one, and it was a peaceful result, but what a fighting game. Hope you enjoyed this one. Do check out the Magic Mind, link in the description. Really enjoying those daily shots. Big bundle, huge discount this month, and have a look at the video on screen for another epic game of chess. Cheers.